Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I will call this meeting to order at 1 p.m. and begin by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish, whose people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding Akleloham, Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, November 25th, 2024, and thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to introduce the other elected members of our council who are joining us here today. Starting on my far left, we have Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Wink. To his right is Councillor Alison Morse. To my far right is Councillor and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. To her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Judy Getty. We're also joined by several members of our professional staff team here this afternoon, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Kieran Dillon, our Corporate Officer, Sophie Insignia, as well as other members of our staff who may be presenting agenda items here this afternoon. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the public comment and question and answer portions of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca and streaming live on our YouTube channel to the masses right now. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our home. We are all passionate about what happens here. I encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct comments during the public comment and question and answer portion of the meeting to myself. The agenda and full council package for this afternoon's meeting is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. It includes all of our staff reports. With that, I will look to our corporate officer for the addition of any late items here today.
There are no additional late items.
Okay, and with that, I will look for a motion to approve the agenda for the November 25th, 2024 regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion, changes, amendments? Seeing none, then I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments, I'll look to our corporate officer for any public comments today.
We have one this morning or this afternoon. And that is Wendy Moore.
Okay. Ms. Moore, if you want to join us up here at the front, you have 3 minutes to make your comments to council. And that time does not start until you're comfortable and ready to go.
Well, and thank you for listening to Mayor, Council, and staff. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I am just speaking to the motion you're going to be looking at later for rezoning of 561 564 Collins Road. That is my mother's property, long been in the family. Just kind of, you've heard from my brother before, but just want to, state again. And we love the lovely island. I am my mother's power of attorney. I'm trying to hold as much as I can to what she would like to do for her property. But the other thing is she's 102 and a bit, lives on our own house still, but with care. She needs full-time care. That's very expensive. And the amount of money she has in her bank account is coming down pretty quickly. So we were faced with a hard choice. I would love to keep her in her home, is what she knows. She's been there since 1984. It is her place. She knows that people on the island, people come by and visit. So we're just trying to raise money. The only thing we could really think of to do is to rezone her back property, which just has a abandoned cottage on it. We'd love to keep part of it, but sell some to get some money for her care. That's our main motivating behind everything. Also, she did want to do some conservation. I mean, we did the conservation study just because, wanted to know. And obviously there's some things on there like the swampy area and the back rock we'd love to conserve. And so, her goal was to always try to keep a lot of it wild. She'd like the deer to be able to walk by unobstructed. That was kind of the goal of what she liked to that. So that was just it. Just wanted to give you a little bit of background about why we're doing what we're doing. Any questions, or I'll just thank you.
Not see any questions. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Public comments concluded. We'll move on to delegations. 3.1 Stewardship Center for British Columbia regarding Green Shores. I believe we have Sarah Primo from the organization joining us here today.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear.
Okay, a little too loud. Okay. Can I start?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council and staff for allowing me to share information about the Stewardship Centre for BC and our Green Shores program with you today. My name is Sarah Primo. I'm a landscape architect and an ecologist, and I'm the new executive director for the Stewardship Centre for BC. And I'm calling in from Parksville on the island, the traditional and unceded lands of the Snuneymuxw, Qualicum, and Comox First Nations. Next slide. So the Stewardship Centre, if you're not familiar with us, is a nonprofit organization with a vision to help British Columbians understand, enjoy, and sustain healthy ecosystems through stewardship. The Green Shores program is a flagship program and is applicable and is being implemented on both the west coast of BC and as well as starting to be expanded through Atlantic Canada. Next slide. The goal of me speaking with you today is to raise awareness of the Green Shores program and all of its components, and to support the local government members from Bowen Island Municipality in their work with the who are currently sitting on the Green Shores Local Government Working Group that we facilitate. I want to introduce the Green Shores program and principles, highlight the benefits of Green Shores, and talk a little bit about how Green Shores could be applied in Bowen Island Municipality. The image at the bottom is, sorry, not Jericho Beach, it's New Brighton Park in Vancouver, one of our Green Shores certified projects. Next slide. So what is Green Shores? If you haven't heard of it, Green Shores is a framework for designing and applying nature-based coastal approaches to shoreline management. It is a trademarked term, and that ensures the high quality of the program in its implementation so that we don't run into situations where people are claiming a project to be Green Shores when it actually hasn't been through our program. It is a program intended to help communities adapt to climate change and sea level rise in particular, and all the impacts related to that. And Green Shores protects the ecological and social economic values of the shoreline. So it's intended to do both, help protect the shoreline and also increase its ecological and social benefits. Next slide. There are 4 guiding principles underlying all of our various Green Shores program initiatives. One of the really important ones that runs counter to the conventional approach to shoreline management is to preserve or restore physical processes. So it's very commonplace for people to put in hard engineered shoreline structures such as seawalls or lock block walls or riprap. And while these might help mitigate erosion in the short term, they actually exacerbate erosion in the long term, causing homeowners to often have to increase the size and height of the seawalls or hard armoring over time. And it also results in a huge loss of coastal biodiversity. So our system is intended to restore and protect those physical processes. At the same time, the methods that are used for Green Shores help to maintain or enhance the habitat function and diversity along shorelines. This is often done by replacing the type of sediment that used to be along the shorelines, enhancing the conditions with organic material like large woody debris, and restoring native plant communities. Having a healthy riparian zone and healthy upland vegetation also helps prevent and reduce pollutants from entering the aquatic environment, in addition to those things having high biodiversity benefits for species. And altogether, these approaches help to avoid or reduce cumulative impacts to the shoreline ecosystem. Next slide. And so these show this sort of the pair of photos. The top photos show the before conditions of 2 of our Green Shores certified projects, showing what is all too common along the coastlines of BC, either hard engineered seawalls or manicured landscapes down to a hardened edge. And to the bottom photos that show the after photos of 2 projects that have gone through the Green Shores program to increase the protection for the shoreline homeowner, but also increase the coastal biodiversity. Next slide. The Green Shores program originated from this document in the middle of the screen. It was a coastal shore stewardship guide that was part of our stewardship series over 10 years ago. And that evolved into two programs, the Green Shores for Shoreline Development program for larger scale developments, commercial, larger like multifamily redevelopments, and then the Green Shores for Homes program for single residential properties. And so these have evolved from the original pilots in 2010 and 2015, and were most recently updated in 2023 to now be applicable from coast to coast. Next slide. Green Shores is a science-based program with 10 years of research and development from ecologists, biologists, engineers, policymakers, and many others. It promotes shoreline project design that dissipates wave energy, accommodates storm surges, and lessens flooding. It also incentivizes habitat restoration and the creation of natural areas while protecting coastal ecology and sediment transport. It offers a resilient approach to sea level rise adaptation, climate change adaptation, and while, of course, protecting and enhancing the shoreline for human benefit. Next slide. And the Green Shores program has been validated. We have a solid track record of endorsement, recognition, and funding from government and private grant funders. Next slide. So the Green Shores program in BC is made up of three components. There's the Green Shores for Shoreline Development that I mentioned, Green Shores for Homes, and there's also the Green Shores for Local Government. And we do the third one by convening a local government working group. We have two staff members from Bowen Island Municipality on our local government working group, and we meet monthly to discuss and share resources and to advocate for policies that support ecological approaches to shorelines. Next slide. We also have published credit and rating guides, so for the different certification programs, and they're both built on a format similar to Built Green and LEED, using a credits and rating system framework that incentivizes achieving a higher score with a more ecologically progressive design. Next slide. This is another slide of our local government working group members. So as I mentioned, we meet monthly and in person once a year. So it's a really important forum for planners, mostly planners from coastal municipalities, to get together and share barriers and find ways to overcome challenges to implementing Green Shores projects. Members also work together to implement Green Shores demonstration projects and share lessons learned with each other. And we've recently participated in a large-scale legislative tool, the development of the Coastal Marine Strategy for BC, which is in the early stages of implementation. Next slide. We also offer Green Shores training. This is done by 3 different levels. Introduction to Green Shores is level 1. Level 2 is a more in-depth application of the Green Shores credits and rating systems. And that's an in-person course with a lot of hands-on experience. And then level 3 is the approved professional program, whereby professionals can who have gone through level 1 and 2 and had hands-on experience with the Green Shores program project can become an accredited professional. And these courses are available to members of the local government working group free of charge. Level 1 is, and then level 2 is also available. We've had 650 people go through the trainings since 2016. And they're available for anyone, homeowners, professionals, contractors, government staff, developers. We've had everybody. Next slide. In the end, the goal is for a Green Shores project to receive accreditation. There are 2 levels for homes, silver and gold, and 3 levels for shoreline development, bronze, silver, and gold. Homeowners sometimes will go through the program and use the guides, but don't necessarily enroll. But we feel that there's a real benefit to enrolling and becoming certified for increased awareness of the program. And there's also eligibility growing incentives program. We're trying to develop a financial incentives program for certification. Next slide. A couple of our current Green Shores project sites that have been recently completed. This one is at Cultus Lake. So I didn't mention it, but we do also have a freshwater program. This on the left shows the before conditions, and on the right shows after conditions. So this was a degraded, eroding section of public shoreline at Cultus Lake. Cultus Lake is very important for the endangered sockeye salmon and other endangered species. And so the goal was to help mitigate the erosion and also increase its habitat value for sockeye salmon and other species. Next slide. And this project shows another recent completion of a Green Shores project at Esquimalt Gorge, where there was a public park with manicured lawn down to the water's edge. And it removed a section of riprap and restored a healthy ecosystem along the shoreline. Next slide. So in summary, Green Shores is a Made in BC framework that helps homeowners and landowners implement nature-based coastal solutions to maintain, restore, and enhance shoreline ecosystems. Research has shown a plethora of benefits that can be had from a Green Shores approach, and a shoreline study that was done in 2020 found the Green Shores for Shoreline Development Program had a 7-to-1 return in direct benefits for every dollar invested in the project. Next slide. So Green Shores opportunities on Bowen Island. Under Section 2 of the Green Shores Credit System, Natural Environment, there's a number of great things that Bowen Island Municipality is already doing. Bowen Island Municipality already has the second highest percentage of natural lands of any Islands Trust community at 78%. A lot of the shoreline is bedrock, but the Green Shores approach does apply to those scenarios as well. We think that there's a great alignment between Green Shores principles and existing principles and objectives in Bowen Island municipalities, OCP and development permit areas. We already do have great participation from 2 staff members in the local government working group. And I understand there's been opportunities for forage fish, spawning, habitat, and erosion mitigation that have been explored for parts of the island. So there's an opportunity for further community education, such as by having a level 1 workshop offered on the island for homeowners, as well as continuing to work with the local government working group to find grants and funding opportunities to implement a pilot project on Bowen Island. Next slide. So yeah, please let me know if you have any questions about the program. You can also reach out to me. You can replace the Andrea at stewardshipcenterbc.ca with Sarah at stewardshipcenterbc, or you can just email Andrea and she can field your inquiry as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll look to council for any questions or comments from our delegation. Councilor Morris, followed by Councilor Fast.
I just have a curiosity question about the very last slide, which says thank you to our partners and funders. And we're the only municipality listed. So none of the other municipalities in the Lower Mainland are partners. I don't know that we funded anything, but I'm not sure.
No, sorry, where?
Very last slide.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No. Can you pull up that very last slide? Sorry, I skipped over it. You're definitely not the only municipality. We just highlighted your logo there because you're a participant in the local government working group. Currently, we have 28 members on the local government working group, including Capital Regional District, Cowichan Valley, Comox Valley, Town of Qualicum Beach. We've got Catet Regional District, Sunshine Coast. So we've got a lot of the coastal municipalities on the local government working group. Yeah, these are some of the granting agencies, funding agencies that have contributed to the demonstration sites. The Council for Environmental Cooperation is the funder of the local government working group. Right now has been funding it. And We've also received a lot of core funding through Environment and Climate Change Canada and Fisheries and Oceans, as well as the province of BC through the Community and Emergency Preparedness Fund.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
Councillor Morse.
oh, go ahead. Mhm.
Over to you, Councillor Fast.
Oh, I was just going to say, congratulations on making it coast to coast. That's great. And I've been following this process with interest. As I recall, we've used some of the principles in some of the projects on Bowen over the years, and good to hear. And thank you. This is good timing for our OCP update.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Looking for any other questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation and for being here today. That's really interesting work that you folks are doing.
Thank
Happy to be a
you.
part of it.
Thank you. Take care.
Another question.
Are you still there, Sarah?
It doesn't matter.
I am.
Oh,
It's a process question. Since Councillor Fast mentioned it might be relevant information for OCP steering committee, should we refer the PowerPoint presentation to the steering committee?
sure. I mean, unless there's, we can do that by unanimous consent. If there's any objection to referring it to the OCP steering committee. Seeing no objection, we'll refer it to the committee for information. Thank you again, Sarah.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
And just coming back to our agenda here, moving on to the consent agenda, I'll look to council for any items that they would like to pull from the consent agenda. Councillor Wake? 12.2.
4.7.
Any other items that council would like to pull from the consent agenda? Councillor Morse?
A slight wording change to the recommendation. It's looking.
We'll just pull it and then deal with it. Seeing no further items from councillors, can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Carries unanimously.
One question. Did you say you're pulling 12.7?
No, 4.7.
Thank you. Confusion. Thank you.
So we'll deal with these in numerical order. First item is 4.5 application for Rural Transit Solutions Fund. Over to you, Councillor Morse, for change in the wording of the
A
recommendation.
slight wording so that we can maybe tinker a little bit with the grant application itself. That council approve applying for a grant from the Rural Transit Solutions Fund Planning and Design Projects and direct staff to submit an application by November 28th.
Okay.
I changed it.
Is there a seconder?
That.
Moved by Councillor Morse, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously. 4.7 draft minutes of the Community Center Joint Management Committee. Over to you, Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. Just one brief question. I'm not even sure who might answer it, but in the minutes, there's a sentence there about consideration of whether staffing should be the responsibility of the Hearth or the municipality. So just curious, are we talking about staffing as in finding people or paying for people? And wondering if there's any financial implications that to municipality based on just from that.
I'll refer that question over to staff.
Yeah, thank you for the question through the mayor. Yeah, there would be some financial implications of that. I believe the management committee is working through that, and Kristen might have some further, or sorry, the CFO might have some further information on that.
The committee is considering a couple of different positions and how to staff it in order to fill those needs in the community. Mostly pertaining to supporting booking arrangements, supporting venues that are coming from off island. So I do believe that in the very near future, council will receive a proposal for sort of a joint staffing agreement that has been worked on collaboratively with the Heart and with the municipality for consideration in the budget.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion on this piece? Seeing none, I will look for a motion that the draft minutes be received. Moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor. Is that a second or a question, Councilor?
Is this, did we miss 12 points?
I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, sorry.
But I'll also take your hand as a second to receive those minutes. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye, that carries unanimously. And then we are over to 12.3, which is Ariana Rain regarding gas station generator issue. Over to you, Councilor Wade.
Yeah, so this, I thought this was a good letter from Ryan Lorraine and raising that, I think, a very reasonable point, which is that our gas station does not have any backup power. And in the event of a island-wide power failure, especially for over a period of time, it would be great if we had a supply of fuel. So I would recommend that we just refer this to staff.
Okay. Move to refer. Councilor Wake, is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Getty, and I'm presuming it's a referral for comment and report back. Okay.
To emergency planning or staff generally?
Staff generally, and then
They'll figure it out.
the leadership team can figure out where to triage it to.
Mm.
Just on the heels of that, it's a bit of a tangential issue, but it also came to my attention the other day that the gas station is looking at possibly making it a non-staffed gas station. So they've installed a keypad. It's presumably may become entirely self-service. And there's been some discussions raised in the community about us, how folks that aren't familiar with the island or tourists or other folks might be able to access that without having any personnel on the island. So I just wanted to raise that, and if there's ever a conversation by staff to the gas station proper, it would be, I think, worth asking what the fuel access plans are generally with that station. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. Consent agenda dealt with. No business arising from the minutes. Moving to bylaws, we have 7.1, 561, and 564 Collins Road, bylaws 671 and 672. To amend the official community plan, land use bylaw. I'll just keep moving until Mr. Martin gets to the desk. Fan, but I'll turn it over to him as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the introduction. I will just start my. As the mayor says, I'm here today with an application to amend our land use bylaw and our official community plan. At 564 Collins Road, you heard from the applicants already in this meeting. But by way of refresher, this is the subject property outlined in blue, located on Collins Road, just north of the regional park. And as a refresher, this application before you is to rezone the property and to amend the official community plan to permit the property to subdivide into 2 lots divided by Collins Road. Each lot then would be about 1.4 hectares in area. And I thought I'd give the council a refresher of where we are. So this application was introduced to council, we completed referrals to the Advisory Planning Commission Parks and Trails. So we're back with bylaws presented for first reading. But just to sort of show that this bylaw would have several steps still to go in terms of a bylaw to amend the official community plan. So our letter is patent and our protocol agreement calls for referral to the Islands Trust after first reading. Bylaws will return for second reading, public hearing, third reading. I'm using my name. And then for a bylaw to amend the official community plan, it gets sent to the Islands Trust for approval after third reading. So it would do that twice before council could consider adoption of the bylaw. I wanted to bring council the results of the referrals from the APC and the Parks and Trails. So the Advisory Planning Commission supported the application. They supported the proposed contributions for the conservation development policy, which discussed trail connection and conservation covenant, so that 50% of the property would be protected from development. They supported, the trail connection. They're encouraged by the support of the neighbors that was provided when we introduced this application. The Parks and Trails Greenways Advisory Committee supported the application. They provided comments about the proposed trail amenities should connect to the trail in Crippen Park. They wanted consideration to be given to habitat values and ecological quality, and that staff explore other designations such as park designations. And you'll see in your report some comments from the applicants with concerns about the trail connection, impact on potential future development. I've just shown here just a sketch of where sort of some of the conflict lies. So the proposed trail from the applicant essentially would come down the property to connect with Crippen Park here. So it's about a 90-meter stretch. And the Parks and Trails Greenways in their site visit was pointing out the desire to connect to the sort of informal trail in Crippen, which is about another 90 meters further south. Some of the applicants' concerns with that extension of the trail network is that essentially the ideal building spot for the house could easily be sort of parallel to where this house is developed on the neighboring property, so in this area. And so the impact of a trail extending further through the property. But the Parks and Trails desire was essentially that concern that Crippen Regional Park may not be supportive of further informal trails being built on Crippen Park, and so the proposed trail connection may not connect anywhere on Crippen, whereas extending the trail would provide that connection to an existing sort of walking route through Crippen Park. So those were some of the back and forth I think we would still be working through this application as we move forward. But wanted to highlight that sort of difference for council. The two bylaws that are before you, 671 would amend the official community plan. It would change the designation to be RS rural residential instead of R1 rural. And the bylaw 672 would amend the land use bylaw by placing the northern portion of the property as the settlement residential 1A zone, which would match the southern portion of the property, which is already zoned settlement residential 1A. So the effect of these two changes would permit the lot to be subdivided into two lots. And so the recommendation here before you is to give first reading to these two bylaws and to refer to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Islands Trust Conservancy, who I haven't discussed, but have a conservation covenant on a neighboring property. So we want to receive referral to the Conservancy for that reason. And then that the two bylaws and the Islands Trust policy checklist be referred to the Islands Trust. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I'll look to council for questions, comments. First, with Council Getty.
In the reply to the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee and the meeting that you had with the applicants after that, there's mention of concerns about potential northern connection. So I found your map in terms of the southern connection very helpful, and I think that in terms of being able to put something on a map, I haven't marked the lot, so I'm not sure what that is referring to.
Sure. So the Parks, Trails, Greenway. Pointer. All right, so the northern property, another northern side of the property, northern side of Collins Road, connects upwards and connects to a private property that runs sort of parallel on top. And then through that, it would be potential to connect through that property to get further, to potentially get into the Crown land itself. The topography, I think, was quite challenging. We looked at maybe there's a potential route if you make it to the back of the property. So the Parks and Trails committee was considering, what are future connections that could be made from Collins Road in general to the Crown land, and wanted to explore trail dedication running through that northern part for a future trail connection. And the applicant has similar concerns about impacting potential development of the lot. So I think it's something to work through that could be done in a way that isn't isn't impacting future house site or future, to the point of sterilized It's not me.
So if I'm looking at page 8 of 16 of your report, and that's the map. So the Crown land would be on the very top of the map that's just off the, and then there's a perpendicular lot that goes across what's marked as lot A, so that's privately owned, and Crown is north of that. Okay.
Yeah, so there's no potential for current connection through the road.
Thank you.
Councilor Morse?
And that's being left at that trail connection, that trail connection.
Yeah, or at least for future discussion, but I think the priority for staff's point of view is the southern connection.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure, because I'm looking at the map and thinking, well, there's McGee Road. You know, which accesses Crippen Park, and Crippen Park accesses the Crown, so. There is access from that area. Okay, so just a curiosity question. Why did we, I guess I'd have to remember, label all those lots R1? Because there's A and B, which I assume are two legal lots right next door, and 1 and 2, I assume, are two legal lots. So they're all legal non-conforming under the OCP, because they're all what I would say fits in RS, right?
I mean, there are many places on Bowen where the existing lot size is significantly smaller than they allow in a rezoning or subdivision, like in that subdivision.
And are you able to expand upon the comments? So if that connector, to the slide which had the trail connector. So if that 90-meter connector was flipped to the Crippen side, so it sounded like the Metro Vancouver would be reticent to run that 90 meters themselves.
I think it's more just unclear if they, so it, extending it would connect to an existing, it's existing there as opposed to then require action or at least permission, I guess, from Metro for the connection point.
Okay. And then how are these set up? Are they just set up as like a right of way?
Yes. Yeah.
And then who's responsible for the maintenance of it?
We are typically the municipality responsible for the maintenance of the trail.
Okay. So it might be more advantageous to the municipality to flip it to the Metro side and say, hey, we have this connector. Are you able to complete it on the Crippen side?
Yeah, potentially.
Yes, Councillor Fast.
If I may contribute from my long ago, like 25-year plus, when I worked for Metro Vancouver Parks, at that time, these kinds of trails were called unofficial trails, and I don't want to spend any budget on them. As they exist, but they are not usually put on any public access maps, or people visiting the park don't know about them. And so I think that was part of the thinking from the Parks, Trails and Greenways Committee that I'm on.
Okay. Any further questions, comments, concerns before we look at getting a recommendation on the table? Seeing none, can I have someone move the recommendation, please? Councillor Fast.
Yeah, I'll move that bylaw number 671, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Official Community Plan Bylaw number 282, 2010, Amendment Bylaw number 671, 2024, be read a first time. The bylaw number 672, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw number 57, 2002, Amendment Bylaw number 672, 2024, be read first time. That bylaws number 671 and 672 be referred to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Islands Trust Conservancy, and that bylaws number 671 and 672 and the attached Islands Trust policy checklist be referred to the Islands Trust.
Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Martin. it looks like you're also here for 8.1 interim housing needs report. So back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm here with a report. We came in September with a draft interim housing needs report. So this is the new report that's required provincially the province. And it needs to show our anticipated housing need for the 20-year and the 5-year projected future. And so after presenting it and then discussing the report with the Housing Advisory Committee, we're back with the finalized interim housing needs report, looking for council to receive that report. The data itself is unchanged in the report. It's just the formatting has been altered to look like the report. And then I'll just highlight for council that our next steps would be a project to review our land use bylaw to determine if the land use bylaw has sufficient number of housing units in it to satisfy our 20-year housing need projection. And we anticipate bringing something to council in early 2025.
Thank you. Any questions for the manager of planning? I guess just to add some narrative to this report, because I think it's an interesting one to read. Lots of data there, maybe difficult for the public to tease out. Are there things that in your professional opinion stood out to you, or directions that this has us to consider? Or does it feel just like a standard report that doesn't have too much in the way of key findings?
I think as somebody who was trained initially doing housing projections, it's an interesting methodology. It's interesting how the province has required consideration of things like suppressed household formation. So saying that, you know, a sort of old school classic housing projection says, you know, you grow by this much, you need to grow by this much in the future. You sort of project forward. And this is saying, well, the effect of having insufficient housing in a community is that people aren't forming new households. And so you end up with, you know, suppressed household formation, that actually the desire is there for more people to live in their own households, but it's not always there. So you see it in terms of, you know, divorced parents who end up living together because they aren't able to separately find housing on Bowen, or, you know, adult children who are living at home because they can't find housing on Bowen, where in an ideal world they would have housing available for them. And the other thing that I've talked to the some members of the OCP steering committee is that in terms of reviewing our projected housing need for compliance in our OCP, you know, this report says, well, there is enough housing in our community plan to meet the 1,394 housing units that are needed in 20 years. But, you know, that would have us in a sort of trajectory of current housing availability. So a lot of that housing availability is, you know, large lot subdivisions with houses with secondary suites on it. And that just because by numbers that meets our housing target, you know, we know from experience, well, most of those secondary suites will not be built. And if they built, it's like, well, is that the housing future of Bowen? Is the housing future of Bowen large single family lot with single family house with secondary suite? It's like, maybe that's not our future. And that's sort of a policy choice rather than a numbers choice. But something for the OCP review to consider.
Okay. Yes, Councilor Wake.
Just commented, it appears to me that the overarching message from this is we need considerably more housing, or perhaps it's going to be an impediment to growth. But regardless, even in our current situation, we need more housing. And I think I'm taking from this that the majority of that needs to be rental housing as opposed to ownership housing. Would that reflect your thinking?
I don't know necessarily from this report if I would determine that. I think probably from our census data and stuff, we know that, you know, there's a shortage of rental housing. It definitely shows up. I mean, I think, you know, in terms of the 1,393 units, 95 of them are for people experiencing poor housing need and 18 for persons experiencing homelessness. So that, you know, there's a you know, large demand for housing for people who are challenged to compete in a housing market.
Councilor Getty.
So basically, this is looking at the projections in terms of growth of the people that want to live here. This does not address capacity. In
This is
terms
not,
of
no.
water and septic.
No.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to receive, please. Moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye, and that carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Martin. 8.2, award of tender for the multi-use path extension. We have Mr. Graham, our Director of Engineering, joining us here today.
Thanks, Matt. Council. Here to discuss how we move forward with the next steps of our multi-use path. We've completed the 1.3 kilometers up from Cardina up to Artisan. And we last year constructed a short 80-meter section that extends past Artisan Lane up to the next culvert. That was done at that time to make sure that we were using our available grant money. And what we've done for this next section is looking at the section from where the path ends now up to Charlie's Lane. There's really two portions of that. The first portion is an off-road section that would extend from the end of the current path partway up to Charlie's Lane and then meet up with Grafton Road. And then the next section, due to the terrain and the steepness of the ravine, really has to be built along Grafton Road. And it would require realignment of the road and some rock blasting on the south side of Grafton Road. So in this case, we've tendered the first off-road portion only. And unfortunately, we only received one official tender submission in response to this tender. We did receive a second price that was a little bit higher than the tender submission, but they weren't able to meet the bonding requirements. So unfortunately, didn't get the response that we were hoping for. And as a result, maybe the prices are a little higher than what we were hoping for. We do have grant money available for constructing this section. 75% of the cost would be covered by grant money. We have a BC Active Transportation grant that does expire in March 2025. So it is important that we proceed with something here in order to make sure that we don't lose that money. And we also have substantial grant funding from TransLink that we've built up over the last 3 years to put towards this type of project. So what we're recommending is that we do award the tender of the multi-use path extension, this next off-road piece, which is about a 300-meter section past where the path currently ends, to North Construction, which was our one tender submission. They are a company that we're familiar with and have worked with in the past successfully on a number of programs. This would allow us to make use of our available grant money and extend the path past a fairly challenging section of road, which is that steep hill just past Artisan Lane. So it would have benefit for users of the path and people wanting to safely get across the island. In terms of our next steps after finishing this piece, we've in hearing from council and from committees, we'll likely defer the next section to Charlie's Lane, which would require the realignment of Grafton Road due to the expected expense of that section. And that would extend past Charlie's Lane around the bend, where there's some challenges relating to existing retaining walls and structures that are close to the road. So really putting off that most difficult section of the path and focusing on building the next section from past Charlie's Lane up to Grafton Lake. We already have one BC Active Transportation grant, a $500,000 amount that's earmarked for that section. We've just recently heard that our Rural Transit Solutions Fund application for that section was unsuccessful, which is unfortunate. We will be applying for whatever additional transit money we can obtain and any additional grant money that we can secure. So the other part of this recommendation are that we allocate $270,000 from the Climate Action Fund for our portion of the construction of the next piece of the path. That we also obtain council direction to apply for the next year, the 2025 intake of the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program to put towards that next section up to Grafton Lake. And that we also apply for allocated and potentially competitive grant funding from TransLink for that same section. So that's where we're at and what we're hoping to achieve in the next phases of the multi-use path. If there's any questions?
Lots of questions. So I'm going to go clockwise because everybody had their hand up at the same time. So we'll go Councillor Fast, Councillor Getty, Councillor Morris, Councillor Saunders.
Thank you for the report. And it's great to see this project moving along. My question is, in the text, I see avoiding the Grafton Road realignment, and you spoke of putting off some of the work past Charlie's Lane. Are you referring to those S-bends? So there'd be a little gap left in the multi-use path?
The portion that we're proposing building here would extend maybe 2/3 of the way from Artisan up to Charlie's Lane. And then it would rejoin Grafton Road. And then we would leave that section up to Charlie's Lane and a little ways past the first S-bend.
Okay.
So there would be a gap there, yes.
Thank you. That's good. Thank you. I just want to make sure I was understanding. Yeah.
Councillor Getty.
Sorry, so I'm a little bit concerned about the numbers, and that may be something for the financial officer, but this recommendation is for $1,059,000, or say 60,000. And you've indicated that it's 75% funded by grants. Is that 75% of that million?
Yes.
Okay, and we're allocating 270 from the Climate Action Fund.
That's the.
Where's the other 500,000 coming from?
Well, if you look at the second page of the report, our total required BIM contribution, because this looks at the entire piece from Artisan Lane up to where this next section would end. And that includes the 80-meter section that's already been built. And that's the way we have to report it for purposes of the grant. So there was already 900,000 of our own funds allocated to build that first piece. And then of our required 25% funding, there's 287,000 remaining that needs to be allocated. Most of that would be coming from the Climate Action Fund. And then there's a $17,000 amount that would be coming from other municipal funds, accumulated operating surplus.
Councillor Morris.
Well, I'm still confused. So how many meters are we actually building?
About 300.
And how many, and where does that end in relation to the steel barrier that's there?
It's before the steel barrier. It's near the top of the staircase that comes up to Grafton Road from the path lower down. Picture that.
So there's no nice little pink flags. So the whole project is costing 1.531. And we've already spent 311. And that 311 included the little bit that goes from Artisan Lane to where the little metal fence is. Where the pavement is.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So how many meters was that?
That was 80 meters.
And how much per meter did that cost? Because the 311 included design and survey costs, so I'm just trying to compare the cost per meter of that versus the cost for this 300 meters.
Numbers of what portion of that was design and survey costs, I believe it was about.
So is it fair to say that per meter cost of this next bit you're asking for approval for is more than what it cost for the other bit?
It is more.
Yes, okay. Well, I'm going back to my original suggestion that for $1 million, we could build a heck of a lot more distance and put in some traffic calming measures, signs on the road, share the road with the bike. You see it in other communities, and I wish I'd taken some pictures. You know, a little sign that says, go slow, bike lane 500 meters ahead, be patient, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I can't support spending $1 million on 300 meters when we could probably, with that $1 million, build, you know, 5 times that, 1,500 meters on the rest of the island.
Yeah, we haven't been able to build that much per meter for any of the sections we've done.
Well, how much per meter did it cost down in the cove?
It was about,
Forgetting the sewer.
it was about 1.5 million per kilometer. This is about twice that.
Yeah, Tuesday.
So anyhow, I can't support it. And I've said that all.
Mr. Saunders?
Thanks. To the mayor, that one of the good things about being last to ask questions is they've been asked, so that's a good thing. I'm curious, you made a comment that this is a little more than you expected. I'm curious to what you mean by a little more, because that's $3,000 a meter that we're looking at here, which just, I'm not in the construction business or the road building business, so I may be way off base, but that seems really extravagant to me, and curious to what you're, well, like you said, the other one was around $150,000 is what it worked out to, or $1,500 a meter, and this is around 3,000. Were you hoping for around $1,500?
No, we knew it
You
was
knew
going
it
to be
too.
more expensive.
Yeah. Does this seem out of range to you, or not built a path before?
Yeah, it's not, it's more than we were hoping for. I mean, it's not way out of whack. The pre-tender estimates from the consultant were that this would be, I think it was about 700 to 750,000, and it's
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree with Councilor Morris there that that's $1 million for me. I don't know. I feel like that money might be better spent elsewhere. Happy to have the debate about it.
And one of the issues is that there's a portion of this money that's from the BC Active Transportation Grant that
Yeah,
needs to be spent in the next few months.
I
And
understand.
we don't have another
Project.
And also, we have been through this with them, asking if we could reallocate money that we applied for specific projects for, which is how the grant system works, and they haven't granted those
Okay,
requests.
so that's good to know. Thank you.
Council Wade.
Just like comments, about postponing this for others. I think it's important, I think I've got it right, that this section, when I ride along there, is where I feel least comfortable, the one we're going to do. Whereas the ones we might do that would be cheaper further along are on flat stretches. In a lot of cases, there is a little bit of a trail on the shoulder. I think it's quite important. Granted, it's gonna cost us more, but it's gonna have to be done at some point. And I think it's more important to get it done sooner than later.
Councilor Fastwell and Councilor Saunders.
Thank you. I'm in favor of this recommendations, and I'll be happy to make the motion when the time comes. I think we've got a big long-term project, and now we've come up from the ferry. a network is by how far people can move along the network, and one that's in bits and patches of doesn't help get people out of cars and be able to enjoy the benefits of a multi-use path and all the climate benefits and affordability benefits for transportation and safety benefits. So it looks to me like this section of the trail is only going to cost Bowen Island Municipality $270,000. The rest of it is grants and from various outfits. And we would be taking that from our climate action funding. So it's not really coming out of taxpayers' pockets. And I think we're just coming up to the most difficult section, unless that was down by the ferry, which we've already got through with the previous council. And I think it's really important that we keep the multi-use pathway moving. Having walked up that section, I haven't ridden it on a bicycle for a long time, but walking up there, you're kind of perched on the steep outer part of the roadway, right beside the pavement, and it's a steep, really steep drop off to the right. And I think it's important to get us up to this far. And I would note that staff is putting the idea of leaving a gap at the difficult and expensive part at the bends there, which we haven't had in front of us at council before. So it seems to me that this is a compromise and that it's not, and that it's all coming out of grant money, if you look at it that way. And I'm in favor and I'm happy to make the motion.
I'm going to clear the speakers list and I've got a couple of comments after Councillor Saunders.
Yeah, just to be clear that there isn't, if we say, no, we're not going to fund this, there's not $1 million there now available to do signs and road work and things like that. There's, because as you said, the bulk of this is grant primarily, right? So like if I were to make an argument that geez, we could spend that $1 million in a better way, we don't actually have $1 million to spend in a better way.
Not really, no.
Okay.
Some of the, there is some flexibility for reallocating some of the TransLink money.
Yeah.
So some of the grant money could be reallocated to something else that would have to be developed.
Yeah.
Like we would have to develop plans and designs and figure out, well, what is that additional or alternate place that we would be spending that money? But some of the grant money is earmarked for this project.
Okay. All right, that helps clarify a few things. Thanks.
Just to drill down into that a little bit more. So we've got, so we talk about 1.531 total project costs. That's only 1.2 million this year because 311 has already been spent in the previous year. And then if I'm hearing correctly, this $500,000 from the BC Active Transportation Grant, that's specifically for this project. We don't have another project to allocate that to if we weren't to go ahead with this. Okay. An ICIP grant, is that Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program? Is that federal?
Yeah, that was federal, provincial. That was the grant that paid for the portion from Cardina up to the school.
Right.
We had a bit of money left over from that project. That
Okay.
we were able to reallocate.
And TransLink grants, are those exclusively for regional greenways? So is that, when you say that could be, there's some flexibility to reallocate that elsewhere?
I was saying allocate to other sections of multi-use path.
Right, but it's not like we can just throw it in general coffers and
No.
allocate it to whatever we want. And then there's 382,000 in the municipal contribution. We've already we allocated 95,000 of that, or close to 100,000 of that last year. Which when we're talking about what we're doing this year, then for 2024, it's 287,000. 270 of which is money that's come from the province in terms of climate action funding. Were there other projects that were being entertained for climate action funding, or what sorts of projects could be undertaken with that?
I believe there's a range of projects that grant funding or that funding would be eligible to use for.
Right.
I'm not sure specifically what was signed in favor of this one, or if we had another project that we had to defer, maybe.
I think we defer the composting, the on-island composting project, right? Yeah. So if we apply that, then what we're talking about here is just for 2024 out of Bowen Island property taxpayer dollars, is it just the 17,000 that we're looking at?
Right.
Just want to work through that in my mind because that seems much less than throwing out a figure of, 1.5 million, 1.2 million. We're talking about a $17,000 contribution from reserves or property taxes. I see some comments on that from Councillor Morris, followed by Councillor Getty.
You raised a question in my mind. So what else was in mind for the 270,000 for the climate action funding? I have a recollection of seeing other things being suggested for that.
Maybe-
Besides the composting, but I didn't look that up.
Maybe I'll refer that comment to staff more broadly if CEO has any comments for CFO.
Yes, I'll direct out to CF.
I said I might. To the manager's environment, some other options that could have been put forward to use those funding for.
Yeah, sure, through the chair. The compost facility was the main project that we were planning on allocating funds to, but the fire department also used some of the climate action funds for solar panels for the new fire hall. I believe that project is complete. These funds are quite a bit more substantial than we had originally planned for because they recently announced dispersal of 3 years worth of funds, and that was to give municipalities a stable funding source and to have it all at the same time, so that we could plan better to use those funds. So we got 3 years of funding all in one. So those are our funds for 2024, 2025, and 2026.
The whole 270.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Getty.
Any questions? Sorry.
Those are my questions. So not seeing any further questions. Councillor Fast for the motion.
Thank you. I move that council award tender number BIM IT 2024-25 for the multi-use path extension to North Construction Limited for the amount not to exceed 1,059,845 plus GST, and that council allocate 270,000 from the Climate Action Fund for the multi-use extension, and that council, can we say multi-use path? That council direct staff to apply for 500,000 from the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program, 2025 intake to fund construction of the next phase of the multi-use path from Charles Lane to Forster Lane. That council direct staff to apply for the 2025 allocated and competitive grant funding that's available from TransLink for construction of the next phase of the multi-use path from Charles Lane to Forster Lane.
Moved by Councillor Fast. Seconded by Councillor Wake. Any
Oh,
further?
Dan, I forgot to ask to have it severed.
It can still be severed. It's been moved and seconded, so we can sever by clause.
Please.
Okay. So we'll look at the first clause, the council award tender number BIM IT 2024-25 for the multi-use path extension to North Construction Limited for an amount not to exceed $1,059,845 plus GST. So that's the second. Any discussion or debate on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay. So that motion carries with Councillor Morris and Councillor Saunders in opposition. Next, the council allocate $270,000 from the Climate Action Fund for the multi-use path extension. Any further discussion or debate on this clause? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay. That carries with Councillor Morris in opposition. The council directs staff to apply for $500,000 from the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program 2025 intake to fund construction of the next phase of the multi-use path from Charles Lane to Forster Lane. Any further discussion or debate on this clause? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries unanimously. And finally, the council directs staff to apply for the 2025 allocated and competitive grant funding that is available from TransLink for construction of the next phase of the multi-use path, Charlie's Lane to Forster Lane. Any further discussion or debate on this clause? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Grant. New business update to council on Metro Vancouver business. Very little to report on Metro Vancouver as there's not been a lot of action in the last 2 weeks. There is a board meeting this Friday where the big item will be a big item is re-election of the chair and vice chair. The agenda for that is available online. Nothing to report on TransLink business aside from just further discussions on bus rapid transit and service improvements. And again, some strategizing around the outcome of the provincial election and what TransLink will be doing to secure funding for 2025 and beyond. Unless there's any questions, I will look to our Islands trustees for an update on Islands Trust business.
I'll just start. Next week is Trust Council meeting in Victoria. I believe you're going to join us, Mr. Mayor, and I think that now you've been invited for dinner.
I have been, yes.
And because part of this is about mixing with everybody and chatting. I will have one item on the agenda following up from a delegation earlier. I submitted a briefing that we asked staff for some information about what it would imply if we were to do something to sue Big Oil. So there might be some discussion about that, or maybe not. But I did put that in the agenda, so I wanted to let you know that that was going to be on the agenda. Whether it gets discussed or not, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Over to, and we've got one committee, the whole coming up. Anyway, over to you, Judy.
Yep, so at the Trust Council meetings in Victoria for 3 days, and there's a little bit of something brewing. I'm not sure what's going to happen with an item that's on the agenda from Governance Council, but see how that plays out. I'm not sure. I'm not getting feedback from the other members of the committee, so I'm a little bit curious why that's happening. But
So are you able to disclose the item?
there was a recommendation that was passed by council that the governance committee present the governance review that was tabled in 2022 to the whole of the trust council. And then that original resolution said that it should happen in 2024. It hasn't happened. There's a bunch of other work that has come in that has sidetracked, but it stayed in our urgent and important part of the work plan. I thought it was sort of next up, but there was a request for decision that went to executive committee that surprised me. I hadn't seen or heard it. And for this to come up for discussion before this council at this meeting. Something that hasn't been discussed by governance committee at this point, and it has potential. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that has to happen in terms of conduct in meetings and a code of conduct and a bunch of other really difficult things. And I would prefer that time and effort be spent on that, and that we simply change the date so that we get this done in 2025. But apparently it's, I'm not sure it may be of interest to people to have it fully discussed at this council. It's like a bit of a distraction, I think, but we'll see.
Thank you. Councilor Morris.
Curiosity question. Did I understand you to say there was a governance report done in 2022?
Yes.
And it wasn't presented to all of Trust Council?
Yes, it was. Well, it was tabled in March of 22, and they had a further workshop so that all the trustees got to go through it in as much detail as they could. And that was reported to Trust Council. And then they did the terms of reference for the governance committee, and they said that the governance committee should go through it and prioritize it and recommend work done by council. And we did that. And there's still some people that want to have this council to thrash it out and have more. I don't know, and
So that was presented at an open meeting in 2022 then.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. There were very few questions, and I'm not sure that people have really been able to analyze it. It's quite a difficult. It's a 70-page document with 15 recommendations that are kind of hard to understand, but they tried with a workshop. That's been done, so.
There will be somebody from the San Juan Islands, which we've got a sort of international partnership with the Islands Trust does with the San Juan County, I think it is. And so there'll be some reporting back and forth and discussion about how ideas and goals align.
There's a joint meeting Thursday afternoon. They're very interesting, totally different setup in terms of the whole county elects 5 people, I think it is, 3 or 5. Yeah, and they are have responsibility for the whole thing.
But it's quite a different setup with their governor and all that.
Great,
Interesting, you'll.
thank you.
It'll be
But
interesting.
I'll be joining you in Victoria next week, so I will be presenting a delegation. So folks know, some of which will deal with the results of the community opinion poll from the 2022 election, but then also a recent motion that we made sent to Trust Council that's been received. Either in person to answer questions, but then after the delegation to talk to whoever wants to talk to me. So if there's feedback that council would like to provide or have me relay to Trust Council, I'm more than happy to take that in, as well as any of the public that are watching as well. Thank you. So moving on to question period, I'll look to the corporate officer or the throngs in the gallery if there's any questions that you would like to have answered here today. None online. With that, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Getty. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.